Greetings, everyone. I'm John Pitcher with the MAC, the Monhaven Arts and Cultural Center in Hendersonville, Tennessee. The MAC is very fortunate to be the first art museum in America to show this exhibit that we're going to be talking about for the next few minutes. It's called Vietnam, Two Soldiers, Two Artists, Two Journeys, Then and Now. I am joined here by our artists, David Wright and Chuck Creasy. We're also joined by our presenting sponsor, Dr. David Black. They all have something in common. They are all veterans of the Vietnam War. Gentlemen, let's get started. David, could you, David Wright, what are we going to see in this exhibit?
We're going to see a compilation of my work done in 1965 when I was in country, and Chuck's work done 50 years after he was in country in 68. That's 2018, after he went back to Vietnam and visited the country and talked to the people there. So his work is going to be a different take than my work was when I was in country in 65. Okay. Mostly minor sketches, a couple of little paintings that I did. I was not an artist, that wasn't my MOS, but I did as an artist, I sketched while I was over there.
Okay, and I suppose I should introduce you anyway. David Wright is one of the world's great painters of the American frontier, of the Civil War. He is a famous artist in painting almost anything historical. The Booth Western Art Museum recently named him Artist of the Year. You were in Vietnam, 1965, in country.
64 and 65.
64 to 65. And you were sketching your comrades, the people you met?
Well, it's been 56 years for me, and the funny thing about this is when we put all of this together, my sketches have been in a box for 56 years.
Okay.
Very few people have seen them. Every so many years, I might take them out, look at them, put them back in the box. Until Chuck and I got to talking about him going back in 2018 and wound up started painting his experiences in 2018. And then we got to talking about, why don't we do a show based on my work that I did 56 years ago and his work that he's doing today. So that's the then and the now part of it then. My work then, Chuck's work now.
Let me turn over to Chuck here. Chuck, what brought you back to Vietnam 50 years after service? What was were you apprehensive? What was your thinking?
No, from the day I got on the medevac plane to leave Vietnam, there was this little seed inside that said, you need to come back someday. And I thought about that for years, and I talked about it as my kids grew up and, saying, one of these days I'm going back to Vietnam. Well, I woke up one day and I was 70 years old and I hadn't been back, and I thought, well, my time's probably passed. So my lovely daughter Shonda and my youngest son Chris came to me on my 70th birthday and said, we're taking you back to Vietnam for a birthday present. So my daughter is with State Department, and she has been all over the world, and she designed a tour for us, a special tour, and we went back for 16 days, and it was just amazing. We toured the entire country from the south, the Mekong Delta, all the way to Hanoi and beyond, up on the Chinese border at Halong Bay, and everything in between. And the highlight for me was visiting the places I was in Vietnam, outside Chu Lai and close to Da Nang up north. We went back to our old base in Chu Lai, which is now a Vietnamese military installation, so we couldn't go on.
Right.
But the guide we had was an English-speaking guide, and he happened to be a South Vietnamese soldier in 1968 when I was there, and he was in Chu Lai. He was actually an interpreter for the 101st Airborne. So we had some really interesting conversations.
Right.
And then we had another English-speaking guide in the South. His father was an Arvin colonel, so we talked a lot about the war. And then in the North, the young man we had up there, his grandfather was a Chinese general in the North Vietnamese army during the war. So we had some really interesting conversations. And they were very open. But I just always felt like, we left that place absolutely destroyed. And it's a beautiful country. I could see that through the bomb craters and all that we left, and I just felt like when that country had healed, it would really be important for me to go back and talk to the people, a sweet people, very open. And so that's kind of what motivated me. And out of that, I decided I needed to kind of document that somehow. And the only way I knew to do that, since I can't write, like you, John, is I'd paint it. So, so I started painting.
Dr. Black, let me ask you, you're best known, of course, as a scientist, but you are also maybe somewhat less known, but just as importantly, a Marine Corps veteran. And I'm wondering, as a Marine Corps veteran from the Vietnam War, what interested you in jumping in with these guys and working with them on this show?
Well, I guess there are multiple answers to that question, but well, certainly one is supporting Mount Haven, which is a great asset to our community. But Diane and I have known David and Jane for years, and we greatly admire his work. But for me as a Vietnam veteran, I think David actually provided the metaphor when he said he kept his sketches in a box and nobody saw them. He brought them out and then he put them back. I think all of us who came back from Vietnam because of the reception we received or didn't receive, we kept things in boxes and we didn't show them, we didn't share them. And I think there was a big shift after 9/11 towards the attitude towards Vietnam veterans. I'm certainly always going to be supportive of any veteran, but especially my Vietnam brothers. But it's a great opportunity to show Vietnam that we knew, put Vietnam in a light that a lot of people today don't even know much at all about Vietnam. I mean, there was a period of time when people just didn't want to know, but now they just don't know. And so this is an opportunity to share history, share experiences. And I want to say, too, something about the sweet people of Vietnam. Might have gotten shot at by these folks, and we took rockets, and it was an ugly history and story. But, you know, when you met the villagers and when you interacted with the villagers, mostly those folks just wanted to grow their rice, raise their children. They themselves were not in the war. That was being fought by others. They just happened to be victims of the war. And it is a beautiful country. I haven't gone back. I haven't had the courage to go back. I keep talking about going back. I guess I better do it. Maybe I better talk to your children, and maybe maybe they'll give me a trip. But, I need to get back. I keep saying so, but I have not done so. And real quick story, there was an interesting letter to the editor in the Wall Street Journal several years ago about an American businessman who went back to Vietnam. I guess he was there maybe about 10 years ago. He said he went into that country and he learned how much the Vietnamese love Americans. They don't love the Chinese as much, but they love Americans. And it made me think, you know, maybe we really did win that war, but we won it because of the character and integrity and the men and women who served there.
That's a fascinating insight. And all of you have talked about the Vietnamese people, which I find interesting because the subject matter in the art, a lot of it is it's very people-oriented. Could you tell me, how is this exhibition different from what other people might expect? I mean, Vietnam was really the first war that unfolded on people's television screens, and I think a lot of people have just that image of the war. What image do you think people will take away from this show?
Well, as David said, you know, we came home to a pretty cold welcome, really, really cold welcome. But even with that, we did our job, and we did it well. I served with Vietnamese ARVN soldiers, and I worked with civilians, and I can guarantee you, they did not want to be under communist rule. The civilians especially would tell me that. And that's what we were there for, is to keep them from falling into country, overtaking them and being a communist country. As it turned out, that didn't work out for us that well. But as Chuck said when he went back and what he's found, it's very revealing to me. I'm kind of like David. I haven't been back yet. And I don't know if I want to go back. Not from the bad experiences that I had. We all had our days in combat and such, but from the standpoint of, there was one group over there, Montagnards, that I served with that I really admired, and I'd like to go back and see what happened to them.
And now those are the people from the Highlands, right?
It's from the Highlands, and I drew them too. So this show isn't about combat art of being downer and bad and evil and dark. Our show was about the war maybe from another side of it, especially Chuck's 50 years later. What happened to this country after we all got out? And 50 years later, he went back and found what had happened then. My drawings are basically the people that I serve with, the civilians, soldiers, Montagnards, and hopefully that this show may be a little more uplifting for people in what they're seeing of and vision of the war than the other side of it, which is certainly there, you know, in that sense. You know, Chuck's beautiful watercolors, God, I'm blown away with them, you know, what he's seeing. And as David said, it was a beautiful country. Once you got out of all of the B-52 bombing runs and all of the other stuff that happened, it was a beautiful country. And the people were good. People I served with were really good people. And you could tell they wanted to be free, democrat country, just like we were trying to make it.
Yeah, I agree with David exactly on that. And to add a little bit to, because your original question is how does our show differ than some of the other perhaps veteran shows? And David hit the nail on the head. It's really not about combat art at all. And I think another unique aspect of our exhibit is that we're looking at it truly, we are reinforcing the title of the show. It is about Vietnam then and about Vietnam now through our art. When I went back, I was absolutely surprised and shocked at how the country had fared after the war. I really didn't know what to expect. But when I saw the high-rises and beautiful apartment complexes and the five-star restaurants in Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City, excuse me, Saigon and Hanoi, and down south, the freeway, 4-lane, 6-lane freeways. It blew me away because it was mud and rice paddies when I was there, and bamboo and thatch hooches. So they are very scarce anymore. I looked. I made our guides take me back up in the mountains in some spots, and it was very hard to find little bamboo hooches anymore. They had concrete block homes. And another thing that shocked me was the personal freedom that the people seemed to enjoy. Yes, it's a communist regime, and that blew me away too. They have cell phones, they have cars and or motorcycles, motor scooters. They have their own homes. They work in a relatively free enterprise system and have their own businesses. So it just blew me away. And what I tried to do was depict that through the art I did, through the sketches and photographs.
And yeah, could you tell us a little bit about how you went about doing this art? Because you weren't there with your watercolors, your brush, and your canvas in Vietnam. Tell us about your process. How did you do it?
Well, I was so interested in the country and the people itself that I didn't take time to do a lot of work on site. I did some rough sketches of particular people, faces that I would just need to do a really nice rough sketch, quick sketch, and I shot hundreds upon hundreds of photographs. And most of my paintings are from those photographs I took, or certainly inspired by those. Like all of us, I took some creative freedom in some of my pieces, but hopefully, and it was hard for me to get away from doing people and faces because I was so taken by that. But I was able to break away and do some landscape and some of the boats and things like that.
I'd be interested to know, because you were mentioning some differences between the Vietnam era and the post 9/11 era. One difference that strikes me right off the bat is that today's Army is all volunteer. That wasn't the case back in 1962. Could you guys tell me a little bit about how you found your way to Vietnam? Dr. Black, maybe starting with you. you're a Marine, so.
Well, I served mostly with volunteers. They did do a little drafting into the Marine Corps
Right.
because of Marine Corps ballooned up beyond its normal contingency. But no, most of the men I served with were volunteers. I joined the service in part because I was too poor to go to college, and I wanted to get the GI Bill. And great benefit of being a combat veteran later on was they extended your GI benefits, and that was beneficial. But I also tell you that I grew up on John Wayne movies, and I was that Marine who wanted to be that Sergeant Riker on Iwo Jima. I was a gung-ho Marine. I will say, you can't see it now, but there's still an 18-year-old Marine inside this old man.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. But one thing I want to comment about the paintings, though. The paintings, in my mind, paintings will say much more than a photograph. Paintings really do put emotion into the picture as to just the photograph itself, although there's beautiful photography. But I think what I see that will come out of this exhibit is it's a view of the war that needs to be shown, because we don't often think of it in the context it's presented. But I think the pictures, like the old adage says, a picture's worth 1,000 words.
Right.
Well, a painting's worth more than that. And I think this will help share a lot of what we experienced and felt.
Well, the one thing that you are all talking about are the people and the sort of the effect that the people had. And so that, I think, obviously is coming back in your art. David, how did you choose your subject matter? How did you, because you were busy doing many different things. What was it that struck you as interesting? That, I've got to draw that.
That's a good question, too. I went over as an advisor. That was my official title with MACV, Military Assistance Command, in December '64. Now, this was 4 months before the American forces built up en masse in March of '65. In fact, the Marines were the first unit to come in country, and I remember reports from Operation Starlight. The first big American battle was the Marines up in I-Corps, and they kicked a lot of butt up there. Was 700, well, we won't get into body count, but unbelievable body. They did their job. Then the others came in after them. So my duties with MACV took me all over the country, and I came in contact with ARVN soldiers I went with, as well as a lot of civilians I worked with. And that's what fascinated me and took me away from the other stuff that I had to do. Okay, so I took a lot of photography. I carried a camera, a little old cheap camera like Chuck did and like David probably did too. But I took pictures every time I could, and then I would go back and sketch and draw sketches from those photographs. The USO had in Saigon a place we could all go hang out and have donuts and coffee, but they also had a dark room. Did you know that?
No.
You didn't know that? They had a dark room, and I could go in there and print my photographs and have coffee and donuts at the same time.
Okay.
But anyway.
I would have liked to just have the coffee and donuts.
Yeah, really.
No, but, yeah.
Hot coffee, my goodness.
Yeah, boy. But that's what when I got a chance, I don't even know, I did 3 watercolors, little watercolors about this. I don't even remember where I got the watercolors because I didn't take anything with me. So I guess I bought a praying set in Saigon and did my watercolors from that. But mostly they were sketches, from photographs that I'd made. But the people, the kids especially, here's one thing that really fascinated me, and you tell me if this is the case with you guys. They'd been at war since World War II, constantly.
Before that, even, yeah.
The kids that were growing up at 6, 8, 10 had been at war all their lives. And yet they had this cheerful outlook that you just wonder how. Yeah. And some of them got killed, and that's the way it goes. I've been involved in dragging out some bodies, stuff like that. But still, at that point, you wonder how they can maintain that real-life attitude, having been subjected to war their whole life. And that's what fascinated me about them and their parents, too.
Well, you have a wonderful sketch. It's of one of the chieftains, I think, isn't it? One of the
Montagnard.
one of the Montagnard chiefs. I think he has a pipe.
Yeah, Montagnard Pike.
And he's looking very philosophical, he's very leaderly like. So obviously there is a certain character underneath what these folks had that war could not diminish. So maybe that's part of what we're seeing.
Well, the Montagnards are up in the Highlands, up in Tucor, and they reminded me so much, even that many years ago, like our American Indians. They were Aboriginal, beyond Aboriginal, they were indigenous, we called them Indig, but they lived very similar to our 18th century woodland Indians. The long houses, they wore breechclouts, of course. They had weaving, they had great art. They had a deep art for this in their whole culture.
Not to mention their prowess with the crossbow.
Yeah, they shot crossbows. I shot crossbows, and I tell you right now, by golly, they work. I would not have wanted to have been on the receiving end of one of their arrows, but still, their whole culture fascinated me because they lived up there isolated in the mountains, and we were training them at the time, and they were good soldiers too. They were fighting for their home, and that's what I guess just brought them together, that they were fighting for their homes and their individuality up in that isolated part of the country, as opposed to the armed soldiers, who were fighting for the whole country there too. But I like to draw them, and they made their own clothing, they made their own, those pipes that's in that drawing, they made those. Very individualistic people, good people. But all of them coalesced to me to be drawing me to doing some representation of those people, as well as the kids and the ARVN soldiers too. I did some American soldiers, but not very many, because I didn't serve with a lot of American soldiers in the unit. David and Chuck served with American units. That's what they had around them all the time. I was an advisor. We had small units that worked with Vietnamese, so I didn't have that experience that they had, in that case. So that's what my work represents, is basically those people I came in touch with.
What struck you for subjects, Chuck? Who were the people you photographed? What was striking you as just visually interesting?
Vietnam is we've stated before, is a beautiful country, but the color and the texture and the water and the mountains, I mean, it all intrigued me. Vietnam is made up of waterways, and most of the transportation, even today, is still done by water. The major rivers, the small canals and creeks, the lakes, obviously the ocean. So I photographed a lot of people on the water, fishermen, young girls poling the canals on the Mekong River, things like that really intrigued me. And then just characters. I mean, everywhere I looked almost was a painting, was a portrait, and it was hard to decide which ones I wanted to paint and which not. But old ladies with the beautiful, aged wrinkles, and young fishermen and older men sitting on the stoop in Hanoi. I mean, everywhere I looked was a painting, almost. So it wasn't hard to find inspiration.
Okay, all right. One thing that is mentioned about this show is that we have a Huey helicopter coming. And there's a great quote, which I'll actually read very briefly. "Beats there a Vietnam veteran's heart that does not quicken at the sound of a helicopter." And I'm wondering, I'm just going to very quickly, maybe starting with you, Dr. Black, what does that helicopter sound represent to you?
It's a sound that's hard to describe. It lives with you. We had a chopper around our house all weekend, just a little civilian chopper, but nevertheless, you pick up that sound way off, and you can hear it, you know it. The Huey sound is unique. For us, for me, I know for those that are medevaced out, it's a sound of mercy or being saved. Around where we were, it was always engaged in battle. I watched too many go down.
Amen.
it's a sound with a lot of mixed emotions. And I have always made a promise to myself I'd never get up in another chopper. And I violated that when I took my kids to Alaska and had to go out to a glacier. So I had a white knuckle flight out on one. But it's got a lot of things attached to it. But it's unmistakable.
How about you guys?
I just wrote a headline for a little teaser ad I put on Facebook about our upcoming exhibit with a photograph of a chopper coming in, and the headline said, helicopters were our salvation and those who flew them our angels. And that sums it all up for me. I would not be here today if it weren't for the chopper pilots. And I can never, ever, as long as I live, be thankful enough for that, them.
Yeah, well, you said it. That quote was written by Nick B. Mills, who was a combat photographer in Vietnam in, I think, '68. And he went on to become a nationally known photographer, traveled all over the world after the war. He's well known. I contacted Nick and asked him if we could use that quote, because if there's one single line that wraps it up for us, it's that, isn't it? About the war.
Yep.
The Huey, there's not a Vietnam veteran anywhere that doesn't recognize the sound of the Huey when it pops the horizon.
Thunk,
Believe me.
thunk, 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 thunk.
Different than every other craft.
Yep.
And you had a lot of different crafts in Vietnam, Chinooks and all the H-40 34s, but the Huey's sound is unique. And somebody said once, and I read this, that every war has a vehicle it's known for.
Right.
And what's that for Vietnam? It's a Huey.
Yeah.
That's it.
Second World War, the Jeep.
I flew as a door gunner for several hundred missions, but still, all of that resonates with everything that took them in and delivered them to potential death, to hauling them out away from it, and bringing them in. The medevacs, those pilots, crew chiefs were my heroes. They really were.
Over the Memorial Day weekend, one of the pictures sent to me was a picture of a bunch of Hueys in Vietnam going off in the distance. And it was a still picture, but I swear I could listen to them. I could hear them just by looking at the picture.
These two pilots that are flying this Huey flew in Vietnam in
Yeah.
62 to 71, I believe.
That's it.
So it's got 8,000 bullet holes in it somewhere. You know that. But both of these pilots that's playing in, Mike Holcomb and Robert Curtis, are Vietnam helicopter pilots. Okay. Yeah. Mike Holcomb flew for Air America and possibly flew the last helicopter out of the embassy when it was abandoned.
Really?
Yeah, in 1973. And Robert Curtis flew Chinooks, shot down once or twice too, but Robert's got 2 books out on his experiences, so both are very qualified to fly them in, and they do this for vets. They bring that Huey out, put it on the ground and fly vets, because we all, some of us anyway, would like to get back in one and try
Enjoy
it
the
one more
ride.
time. As long as there's no incoming tracers, it's probably be a pretty good ride, David.
Well, it might be, it may be.
As long as it's not a hot LZ. I mean,
I'm with you on that.
Yeah.
One thing, David, you had mentioned at one time that it's really stuck with me is that you were talking about Chuck's artwork, and you were saying that it's very open and honest and human. There's no sense of anger or resentment, and if anything, that sort of shows the healing power of art. And I was wondering if you could maybe reflect on that a little bit. How does that really flow through this show? Because I feel that.
Before David answers that, I want to say this. You also feel that very same thing through his sketches and small paintings. He was not showing the horrors and the stuff we dealt with every day, but the human nature and the goodness of it all. So
I just find it fascinating because obviously that's what all of you were really connecting with when you were there. I mean, aside from doing a very hard job, there was a
trying to
big
stay
part of
alive.
that.
Yeah. We both hope that people take away from this show just what Chuck said. This is not the horrors of war, but this is another side of war that we did experience for real. It was there. All war's bad. We know that. But there's also the realization of everybody that's involved in the war on either side are people, and they're doing what they believe in, right? We did what we believed in. And when you fast forward to today, not only Vietnam, but Iraq, Afghanistan, and all wars after that, there's a certain amount of healing that has to be done that comes with that. And as you know, with Max already has a healing arts program for veterans, right? You've already installed that. And so you've recognized that. And if our show people can walk away from our show and not be downtrodden and feel bad about it, then maybe we've accomplished something there. I don't know. We hope so.
I hope so too. Well, my own wife's personal anecdote. Her uncle was a high school principal in Mississippi for decades. And when he passed away, she learned something about him that she never knew, that he had been in the 1st Marines. He had landed on Guadalcanal in August 1942, and he was in that battle, and he never spoke about it, never could speak about it. So I really appreciate when veterans can come out and maybe offer some insights for other people, and who've gone through an awful lot for the country. Certainly, I think you gentlemen are doing a wonderful thing for our country in getting this information out, getting these feelings out, and letting us, really informing us about sort of just humanity.
David and I were joshing the other day. We've known each other for 50 years. Went to the same art school at different times, but have known each other really, really well since '69 after I got back from Vietnam. And we were joking the other day, and he said, why are we doing this? And I said, I don't know. And we decided it was maybe because we feel like it's our last two rides. Who knows, I don't know. But we've had a great time doing it, and I just hope, I hope we're able to get across, with this exhibit, some of our feelings about our service.
And what do you hope people take away, just sort of as a final question? What do you hope people take away from seeing this show?
Well, all of us, David included, and Diane, they've sponsored our show, so they've stepped up and helped this show become a reality. Mont Haven accepting it, Cheryl, you,
Amen. Yeah.
Everybody we've worked with has been great for 2 years. It should have been 1 year, but it's now 2 years. But through all of that, when it's all over and done and the show comes down, hopefully somebody will have taken away 2 things. I'm thinking here, we've discussed this too, haven't we? One, about the art, of course, and it represents a time period in all of our lives. And there's lots of people out there who took part in that time period that may resonate to that art that both of us have done. But also the fact that Mont Haven has already established, before we ever came along, an arts healing program for veterans. Maybe this show will make more people aware of that. Hopefully it will. We hope so, don't we?
Yeah,
all of us do.
Absolutely. I think another thing that I hope comes out of this, I hope there are some people that see it who it helps open up, because there are lots of folks there around us who still have stories yet to be told.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And I hope it encourages people to open up and be willing to face some of those stories. It sure helped me.
Great. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I am John Pitcher with the MAC, here with David Wright, Chuck Creasy, Dr. David Black. This is the first time anyone is going to be seeing this exhibit, but I know it's not going to be the last time. I think this is a show that's going to have some legs, and that's going to tour around. It's an important show, and I hope all of you everywhere get a chance to see it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Black.
Thank you. We were in I-Corps at the same time.
Yeah.
Were we? Yes.
So we